The night everything changed. The night he walked away, the world around me didn't make a sound. Even the rain stopped against the window as if it was holding its breath. That's when I realized silence can be louder than screaming, because in that silence, I heard everything he never said. The lies, the excuses, the promises he made just to keep me from seeing the truth. I remember staring at the empty doorway long after he was gone, trying to convince myself that this wasn't happening again, that he wouldn't hurt me again. But deep down, I knew he would. He always did. You see, betrayal doesn't come out of nowhere. It starts small, with a missed call, a sudden change in tone, a new password, a half smile that doesn't reach the eyes. You feel it before you know it, but you tell yourself stories to keep believing, because love makes fools out of even the strongest hearts. And I was in love, completely, blindly, hopelessly in love with the man who taught me that sometimes the person you'd take a bullet for is the one holding the gun. He wasn't my first heartbreak, but he was the one who made me stop believing in second chances, because I gave him one, and he turned it into a weapon. The first time he betrayed me, I forgave him. I told myself, people make mistakes, that maybe it was me, maybe I wasn't enough. But the second time, I learned that betrayal isn't a mistake, it's a choice. That night, I didn't cry. Not a single tear. My heart didn't break, it hardened. And in that stillness, I made a promise. He would never forget what he did to me, not because I would hurt him, but because I'd become the one thing he never expected, a woman who could live without him. I looked at myself in the mirror. And for the first time, I didn't see weakness. I saw power, quiet, patient, dangerous power, the kind that doesn't shout, the kind that waits. And so I waited. Days turned into weeks. He texted, he called, he apologized, he said all the right things, like he always did, but words meant nothing now. Not after what I found that night. You want to know what broke me? It wasn't the betrayal itself. It was how easily he did it. How naturally the lies rolled off his tongue, as if he had rehearsed them all his life. He looked me in the eyes and said, "You're the only one for me." While his phone, the same phone he guarded like treasure, was filled with messages that said otherwise. Her name was Emily. I remember it now because I saw it flash across his screen while he was in the shower. I didn't mean to look, but maybe I was meant to, because the truth doesn't hide forever, it only waits for the right moment to be found. I opened the messages, and in seconds, my world collapsed. It wasn't just words. It was laughter. It was plans. It was love. My love being recycled and reused. Every "I miss you." Every "can't wait to see you." Every promise he once whispered to me was there, copied and pasted into someone else's life. That's when it hit me. I wasn't losing him. I had already lost him long ago. And instead of crying, I smiled, because I finally saw the truth. He hadn't betrayed me twice. He had simply continued what he never stopped doing. People like him don't change. They evolve their lies. And the only way to stop them is to make them face the mirror they've been avoiding. That night, I didn't plan revenge. I planned silence. Because silence is the most painful truth a liar can face. He called again the next morning. I didn't answer. He texted, "Please, let's talk." I didn't reply. For 3 days, I disappeared from his life completely. And in those 3 days, he fell apart. Funny, isn't it? How the person who breaks you is the first to panic when you stop breaking. I watched from a distance as he began to crumble. Mutual friends messaged me, "He's not himself lately. He keeps asking where you are. He says he can't sleep." Oh, I knew. Because that was my first victory. His peace was gone. He didn't know it yet, but his story had just begun. And this time, I wasn't the supporting character. I was the writer, and I had the pen. Every heartbreak leaves behind a seed, a tiny spark that, if fed right, can turn into something unstoppable. I fed mine with silence, focus, and time. 3 things he never understood. Because men like him thrive on attention. They need someone to beg, to cry, to chase. And when that someone stops doing any of it, they start to lose control. That's what I wanted. Not revenge through pain, but revenge through peace. The kind that whispers instead of screams. The kind that leaves a scar only they can feel. That's where my story begins. Not with heartbreak, not with tears, but with the moment I decided to become everything he said I couldn't be: strong. Untouchable. Because sometimes, revenge doesn't come wrapped in rage. Sometimes, it comes in the quiet power of moving on. And while he searched for me in his guilt and confusion, I was already writing the next chapter, the one where he learns what it feels like to be forgotten by the person who once loved him most. Before the storm, people often say, you never see betrayal coming. But I did. I saw it long before it happened. I just chose to look the other way. Because before everything fell apart, we were perfect. At least, that's what everyone believed. Including me. His name was Ryan Carter Tall. Confident. The kind of man who made every room quieter when he walked in. Not because he was loud, but because he had that energy, calm. Sure. Magnetic. The kind of man you wanted to believe in. And I did. We met on a rainy afternoon 2 years ago, at a small art cafe downtown. I was sketching faces for a freelance project. He sat next to me because it was the only empty seat left. When I looked up, he smiled and said, "Don't tell me you're drawing me. I'm terrible at sitting still." I laughed. That was the first time I realized how easily he could make me forget the noise in my head. That's how it started, with coffee, small talk, and a smile that felt like sunlight after a storm. Soon, coffee turned into dinners into weekend trips, and before I knew it, I was in love. He wasn't just my boyfriend, he became my world. He remembered little things like how I took my tea, or how I hummed when I painted. He would say, "You're my piece." And maybe that's why I held on to him so tightly. I wanted to be someone's piece for once. For a long time, I believed we were unbreakable. We talked about everything, our dreams, our fears, our future. He wanted to start his own business. I wanted to open an art studio for kids. We would lie on the floor of our tiny apartment, planning names for our future dog, laughing over takeout boxes, and making promises that felt eternal. There was this one night I'll never forget. It was my birthday. He surprised me with candles, music, and a small ring box. Not an engagement ring, just a promise ring. He said, "Until I can give you the real one." And when he slipped it on my finger, I believed him. I believed everything he said. Because how could something so beautiful ever be a lie? My best friend Lena used to tease me. "You're glowing, girl. He's your forever." I laughed, brushing her off. But deep inside, her words planted something, a fear I didn't want to name. Because when something feels too perfect, you start to wonder how long it will last. But life was good. Ryan was everything I had prayed for, loving, ambitious, protective. He even met my parents, and my father said, "He's the kind of man who'll keep you safe." I wish he had been right. Our days were filled with laughter and little rituals. Every morning, he'd make me coffee, even though he didn't drink it. Every night, he'd text, "Sleep early. You overthink too much." He said it so casually, but I loved that someone noticed the way my mind never stopped running. Then came the change. It was small at first. A missed call here, a late night there, work pressure. He said, "I'm doing this for us." And I believed him, because that's what love does. It teaches you to trust even when it hurts. Lena noticed before I did. She always had that protective instinct. One evening, while we were shopping, she said quietly, "Something feels off about Ryan lately. You okay?" I laughed it off, pretending I didn't hear the concern in her voice. Because the moment I acknowledged it, I'd have to face the possibility that she was right. But how could I? He still looked at me the same way. He still said all the right things. He still kissed me goodnight. And when he looked into my eyes and said, "You're my everything," I believed him again. Looking back now, I can see all the red flags I missed. The times he avoided eye contact when his phone buzzed. The sudden work trips that didn't make sense. The new password he added for security. The moments when his laughter felt forced. But love makes you blind, and I wore my blindness like a badge of loyalty. Because I didn't want to be that woman, the one who snoops, the one who doubts. I wanted to be the woman who trusted. And that trust became the bridge he used to walk out of my life. Still, I remember the peace before it all broke. The small, ordinary days, breakfast together, drives to nowhere, his jacket draped over my shoulders when I was cold, moments that now feel like ghosts trapped in time. He was my home. And that's the cruelest part about betrayal. It never comes from your enemies. It comes from the ones you built your home with. There's a photo I keep on my desk. Us, at the beach, laughing with the wind in our hair. Every time I look at it, I wonder what he was thinking at that exact moment. Was it love? Or was he already building a world without me? If I had known what was coming, I would have memorized those moments differently. Not as love stories, but as warnings. But that's the thing about storms. They never send a message before they arrive. They just come, and they take everything you thought would last forever. And when they leave, you're forced to start again, from the wreckage, from the silence, from yourself. That was us. Beautiful before the storm, fragile before the fall. I didn't know it then, but I was standing at the edge of my own story. the moment before betrayal, the breath before everything changes, and the scariest part, he was smiling the whole time. The cracks begin to show. It started with silence, not the comfortable kind we used to share, but the kind that hums between two people when something's already broken. At first, I told myself it was stress. Ryan had been working late, new clients, deadlines, pressure from the top. But there was something in his tone that didn't match his words anymore. He was there, and yet, he wasn't. When he came home, his eyes went straight to his phone before they ever found me. He'd smile, kiss my forehead and say, "Rough day." Then he'd vanish into the shower, leaving his phone face down on the counter. He'd never done that before. One evening, while cooking dinner, I asked, "Want to eat together?" He said, "I already grabbed something on the way." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I watched him walk past me, his laughter forced, his mind somewhere else. Little things, tiny, ordinary moments that began to feel wrong. The way he started locking his phone, the way he said "I love you" as if it were a habit, not a heartbeat. Lena noticed again. She always did. We met for coffee one Sunday, and she said quietly, "He's changing, isn't he?" I wanted to defend him, but the words stuck in my throat, because deep down, I already knew she was right still. I couldn't face it. I convinced myself I was overthinking. He was busy. He was tired. He still loved me. I just had to hold on, so I smiled more. I cooked his favorite meals. I left notes on the fridge. "You're doing great. Proud of you." But he stopped replying to them. The sticky notes I once found folded in his wallet started showing up untouched where I'd left them. Then came the late nights. At first, once or twice a week. Then almost every night. He'd text, "Don't wait up." And I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling, counting the lies between his words. The apartment felt emptier with him in it. It's strange how someone can still be beside you and yet feel miles away. One night, around midnight, I called him just to hear his voice. He didn't answer. I waited. 5 minutes, 10. Then a message came. "In a meeting, call later." But I heard laughter in the background, soft, distant, and definitely not office laughter. I told myself I was imagining it. That's what love does, it teaches you to explain away the obvious. A few days later, I noticed perfume on his jacket, not mine, lighter, floral, unfamiliar. When I asked, he laughed it off. "A client hugged me, that's all." I nodded, smiled, but my heart didn't believe him. From that night on, everything felt staged. His phone was always on silent. He started taking extra showers, as if washing something off. When he held me, his arms felt colder, and when I looked at him, I saw a stranger wearing the face I loved. The worst part, he was still kind, still gentle, still thoughtful in all the visible ways, but his eyes, they told another story. One Sunday morning, we went out for breakfast like old times. The sunlight poured across the table, and for a second, it almost felt like us again. Then his phone buzzed. He looked down, smiled, and turned it over quickly. My stomach twisted. "Work again?" I asked, pretending to joke. He nodded. "You know how it is." But I didn't. Because no job makes you blush when you read a text. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked to the balcony, the city lights stretching below like tiny fires. I thought about how love begins and ends not with a fight, but with a quiet shift. The moment you realize the person you trusted most is already halfway out the door. I tried to fight the thought. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe it was me. Maybe I was too sensitive, too jealous, too afraid of losing him. But fear doesn't lie. It just whispers until you finally listen. The whispers got louder the day I saw him outside his office. I'd gone there to surprise him, a simple lunch, a small gesture to bring us back. But as I approached, I saw him standing on the sidewalk with someone else. A woman. He laughed, leaning in just a bit too close. And when she touched his arm, he didn't pull away. I froze. He didn't see me, but I saw everything I needed to. The way he looked at her, soft, familiar, the way I used to be looked at. I didn't confront him that day. I couldn't. Instead, I turned around and walked away, pretending that if I didn't speak it out loud, it wouldn't be real. That night, when he came home, he hugged me like nothing happened. He asked about my day, smiled, told me he loved me, and I said it back. My voice didn't even shake, because sometimes, silence is the only armor left. But inside, something shifted. I began watching instead of trusting, not out of hate, but out of survival. I noticed the patterns. How his phone always rang at the same time, how he suddenly needed to stay late on Fridays, how he changed his cologne, and how he'd shower before hugging me. Every lie has a rhythm, and once you hear it, you can't unhear it. Days passed. The tension became invisible but heavy. We still laughed sometimes, still shared meals. But our connection was built on habit now, not love. And yet, I didn't leave, because leaving would mean admitting it was over, and I wasn't ready, not yet. One night, as I lay next to him, he fell asleep with his phone in his hand. I stared at the screen lighting up with unread messages. For a moment, I thought about taking it. Just one look, I told myself, one look to end the doubt. But I couldn't do it, because the truth, once seen, can't be unseen, and part of me wasn't ready to lose the illusion. Still, I knew something was coming, something that would shatter the fragile world I'd built around us. I could feel it in my bones. The calm before a storm that already had my name written inside it, so I waited, quietly, pretending everything was fine, while my heart prepared for the impact I knew was inevitable. Because deep down, one question kept echoing in my mind. What do you do when the person you love most becomes the reason you can't sleep at night? Betrayal was a Thursday night when the truth finally stopped hiding. Funny how betrayal never knocks, it just walks in like it owns the place. Ryan had been distant for weeks, but that night he seemed almost nervous. He paced the living room, checking his phone every few minutes. I asked if everything was okay. He smiled too quickly. Yeah, just work stuff. But there was something else in his eyes, a flicker of guilt so small most wouldn't have noticed, but I did. I decided to stay quiet. Silence, I'd learned, makes liars reveal themselves. Around 9:30, his phone buzzed again. This time, he grabbed it and walked to the balcony, muttering something about fresh air. The door didn't fully close, and that's when I heard it. His voice softer, warmer, a tone I hadn't heard in months. He laughed, the kind of laugh that used to belong to us. Then the words that froze me completely. I miss you too. I'll tell her soon. Tell her soon. For a few seconds, my body forgot how to breathe. Every sound in the world faded until there was only the echo of those 3 words, circling my mind like knives. I didn't confront him then. I couldn't. My hands were trembling too much to form words. I went to the bathroom, locked the door, and stared at my reflection, pale, shaking. A stranger staring back with eyes full of disbelief. Inside me, something broke quietly. No screams. No tears. Just silence, the kind that follows a bomb after it explodes. When he came back inside, I wiped my face and pretended to be half asleep on the couch. He kissed my forehead like he always did. His lips were warm, but I felt nothing. That night, I didn't sleep. I waited until his breathing slowed beside me, then reached for his phone. My hands moved on their own. No hesitation this time. I unlocked it with his fingerprint. A habit he'd never thought twice about sharing. What I saw didn't need explanation. Messages, photos, late-night plans, love words I hadn't heard in months. She had a name, Mara. Someone from his office. Someone who apparently understood him better than anyone ever had. Every word felt like a bruise I couldn't see. There were good morning texts, lunch photos, and voice notes that started with her laughing softly, a sound I'd once lived for. I scrolled through the thread like someone reading her own obituary. Every I miss you was a nail. Every can't wait to see you again was a funeral bell. And then I saw it. A photo of the 2 of them. At the same restaurant where we'd had our first anniversary dinner. Same corner table. Same wine glasses. Same smile, just not meant for me anymore. Something inside me shattered so completely that for a moment, I didn't even feel pain. Just numbness. A strange calm that comes when you realize the worst has already happened. I closed the phone and stared at the ceiling. The man sleeping beside me wasn't the man I fell in love with. He was someone else entirely. Someone capable of looking me in the eye every day and lying without flinching. I wanted to scream, to wake him up and make him see what he'd done. But instead, I just sat there, quiet, steady, cold. Because the more I thought about it, the more I realized, he didn't deserve my anger. He deserved my absence. The sun rose. He got ready for work, kissed my cheek, and said, "Don't wait up. Might be another late night." I smiled. And this time, I meant it because I knew exactly what late night meant now. After he left, I let myself finally feel it. The grief, the betrayal, the stupidity. Every memory of us replayed in my mind like a cruel joke. The trips, the laughter, the late night talks. All the moments I thought were hours alone. They weren't memories anymore. They were evidence. I walked around the apartment, touching the things that used to hold meaning. The mug he bought me on our first date. The framed photo of us at the beach. The note he wrote saying forever. No matter what. It all felt like lies carved into the walls. At noon, I went to Lena's place. She took one look at my face and didn't ask a single question. I just handed her his phone. She scrolled in silence, her eyes hardening with every message. When she finally looked up, she whispered, "You didn't deserve this." And that's when I broke. Tears finally came, not quiet ones, but the kind that shake your entire body. It felt like grieving a person who was still alive. Lena held me until I could breathe again. Then she asked the question I'd been avoiding. "What are you going to do?" I didn't answer, because I didn't know. All I knew was that I couldn't let him walk away untouched. That night, he came home again, same calm face, same fake smile. He hugged me like nothing had changed, and I hugged him back. He didn't know that I already knew everything. He didn't know that the woman standing in his arms wasn't broken anymore. She was calculating. I remember thinking, if this is what love turns into, then maybe revenge is just love in another form, a colder, sharper kind of closure. Before he fell asleep, he whispered, "You're the best thing that ever happened to me." And for the first time, I didn't believe a single word. I turned away, and let the darkness swallow the last pieces of my old self. Because that night, something inside me was reborn, not as the woman he betrayed, but as the woman who would make sure he remembered it for the rest of his life. In one night, everything I believed in shattered, but in that same night, I learned how to rebuild myself from the ashes. Revenge PL. In the morning after I found out, I didn't cry anymore. The tears had done their job. Now, there was only focus, and silence, the kind that comes before a storm. I remember standing by the window, watching the city wake up, people rushing to work, holding coffee cups, chasing time. Meanwhile, I was standing still, learning how to stop chasing anything, especially him. He thought I didn't know. That was his first mistake. For the next few days, I played my part perfectly. I smiled, I cooked, I laughed at his dry jokes, every gesture rehearsed, every word measured. He didn't notice that my eyes had stopped reflecting him. He was too busy texting her. But what he didn't realize was that every time his phone buzzed, I was saving everything. Screenshots, messages, times, a quiet collection of evidence. Not because I wanted to expose him to the world. No, that would be too simple. I wanted something deeper. I wanted him to feel it. So I built a plan, slow, deliberate, beautiful in its precision. Revenge, I learned, is an art form, and like all art, it requires patience. It started with small things, little cracks he couldn't see, but would eventually feel, at work. I knew his boss, a kind man named Mr. Coleman, who'd always admired our relationship. Ryan often bragged about being a man of principles. I smiled at that irony. One morning, I stopped by Mr. Coleman's office, just to thank him for trusting Ryan with such responsibility. I casually mentioned how proud I was that Ryan was helping Mara from accounting so much lately. His expression flickered, just a fraction of a second. I didn't have to say anything more. The seed was planted at home. I became gentle again. Too gentle. The kind of calm that makes people nervous. I didn't argue when he came home late. Didn't ask questions when he smelled of perfume I didn't wear. I just smiled, that same soft, knowing smile that told him nothing and everything at once. And the thing about guilt is, it grows best in silence. Days passed, then weeks. I focused on myself again, started painting, meeting old friends. Wearing colors I'd stopped wearing because he didn't like bright things. He noticed. One night, he looked at me across the dinner table and said, "You seem different lately." I shrugged. Maybe I am. He smiled, trying to sound casual. I like it, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of uncertainty. That's when I knew the balance had shifted. The next part of my plan was emotional, psychological, not revenge through destruction but through reversal. I wanted him to experience exactly what he'd made me feel: doubt, insecurity, distance, and confusion. So, I started replying to messages late, keeping my phone face down, laughing at texts I never explained. I'd come home wearing perfume he didn't recognize, and say, "Oh, just tried something new." He started asking questions. At first, they were casual, then they turned sharper. "Who were you talking to? You've been out a lot lately. You never used to dress up for just coffee." And I'd smile, tilt my head slightly, and say, "You worry too much." Ryan, he didn't know it yet, but he was standing in my old shoes, and they didn't fit him well. Around this time, Mara started calling him less. Maybe she sensed something had changed. Maybe his sudden clinginess made her uneasy. Either way, their little bubble began to leak. And I just kept smiling, because I knew that sometimes, the most powerful revenge is watching someone destroy themselves trying to fix what they broke. Then came the night I'd been waiting for. We were invited to a small office dinner. Mara would be there. He didn't know that I knew that. He didn't know that I'd chosen my dress, my words, my smile, all with the precision of a surgeon preparing for a masterpiece. The dinner was held at a fancy restaurant, the same one from the photos I'd found on his phone. I wanted that symmetry. I wanted him to see the ghost of his own mistake reflected in real time. As we walked in, I could feel his hand tremble slightly against mine. Mara was already seated across the room. The moment her eyes met his, I saw panic flicker in his. I didn't say a word. I just greeted everyone warmly, including her. The silence that followed was delicious all evening. I acted like the perfect partner, laughing at jokes, complimenting colleagues, making sure my presence radiated calm confidence. And Ryan, he fell apart in slow motion. The more composed I became, the more nervous he looked. At one point, I leaned close to him and whispered, "You look like you've seen a ghost." He froze. I smiled. And then, I turned to Mara and said softly, "You and Ryan must work so closely. I hear you make a great team." Her glass slipped slightly in her hand. The room fell quiet for half a second. Ryan's face turned pale. That's all it took. No drama. No scene. Just a few words. And the silence that followed carried everything else. When we got home, he finally broke. He followed me into the kitchen, his voice shaking. "Did you know?" I looked at him, not angry, not sad, just tired. "I've known for a long time," I said. "I was just waiting to see how far you'd go." He tried to explain, to lie, to beg all at once, but I didn't listen, because in that moment, I realized something. I no longer needed revenge to hurt him. The truth itself had already done that. I told him calmly, "I'm leaving tomorrow. You'll find everything you've hidden exactly where you left it, except me." He looked like he wanted to speak, but nothing came out, just silence. I walked past him, grabbed my bag, and said one last thing before I left. I smiled through my pain, but every smile was another brick in the wall between us. Now that wall is complete, and you're on the other side. And I walked away. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't even feel sad. I felt powerful because I had turned my heartbreak into something beautiful. Control. Revenge didn't need to be loud. It just needed to be smart, and the best part, he never saw it coming. CLI Maxie didn't look back that night, when I walked out of our apartment. It was strange. The silence that followed me down the hallway didn't feel lonely anymore. It felt like freedom wearing quiet shoes. Ryan called me 8 times before I even reached my car. I didn't answer. For once, he was the one losing sleep. The next morning, I packed the rest of my things. I moved into a small studio apartment across town. Nothing fancy, just a space that was mine, untouched by his lies. It had a single window overlooking the street. And every morning, I watched the sunrise with coffee in hand. I hadn't realized how beautiful silence could be when it wasn't filled with secrets. But the story wasn't finished yet, not until he faced what he'd done, not with shouting or revenge, but with truth. A week later, Ryan showed up at my door. He looked exhausted, the kind of exhaustion guilt gives you. Dark circles under his eyes, unshaven, shoulders slumped. For the first time, he didn't look like the man who broke me. He looked broken himself. I opened the door slowly. He started to speak, but I raised a hand to stop him. "You're not here to apologize," I said quietly. "You're here to feel better about yourself." He froze. "That's not true," he stammered. I can't lose you." I almost laughed. The irony of it, he'd already lost me long before I left. But I stayed calm. "You already did, Ryan," I said. "You just didn't notice until now." He looked around my small apartment like he was searching for something familiar. There was nothing for him to find. No photos of us. No trace of our life together. Just me, standing there, solid, unshaken. "I made a mistake," he whispered. "It meant nothing. She meant nothing." That line, the one every guilty man rehearses, it didn't even sting anymore. Because when someone betrays you, the pain eventually fades. But the clarity remains forever. "It meant everything," I said softly, "because it showed me exactly who you are." He tried to reach for my hand. I stepped back. The movement was small, but the message was clear. For the first time, he understood distance, not physical, but emotional, the kind you can never cross again. I watched as realization hit him, the slow collapse of a man, realizing that charm and excuses can't fix something that never should have been broken. Then I told him something I hadn't planned to say, but maybe it was always meant to come out. "You didn't just cheat on me, Ryan. You cheated on the version of me that believed in you." And that version is gone. He looked at me, eyes wide, as if seeing me for the first time, and maybe he was, because the woman standing in front of him wasn't the one who used to wait for texts, cry in the dark, or shrink to make him comfortable. This woman stood tall, quiet, fierce, and untouchable. "What do you want from me?" he asked finally, his voice breaking like glass. I took a breath. "Nothing. That's the difference between us. You always wanted control. I just wanted peace. Now I have it." He tried one last time, the desperate apology, the promises, the "I'll change" monologue. Everyone rehearses when they realize the door is finally closing. But I didn't interrupt him. I let him speak, because sometimes silence is the loudest answer you can give. When he finally stopped talking, I said, "You don't get to fix this with words, Ryan. You get to live with it." I picked up an envelope from the counter and handed it to him. Inside were printed photos, all the messages, the late-night texts, the evidence I had collected. "Take them," I said, "not to threaten you, just as a reminder of who you became when no one was watching." He opened the envelope slowly, and I could see the moment he saw the photo, him and Mara, smiling in the restaurant. His expression cracked, and for a moment, the silence between us was so heavy it felt like gravity itself. "I don't even know why I did it," he whispered. "I loved you." I smiled a small, sad smile. "Then maybe you should learn what love actually means." He turned toward the door, then looked back one last time. "Is this really it?" I nodded. "It's not the end," I said softly. "It's just not our story anymore." He hesitated, like he wanted to say something else, but there was nothing left to say, so he walked out, closing the door behind him. I stood there for a long moment, listening to the sound of the lock clicking into place. It didn't sound like loss. It sounded like peace. That evening, I sat by the window again. The city lights shimmered like tiny confessions. I thought about how pain changes people, how it strips you down until all that's left is truth. And as I sat there, I realized something powerful. He didn't just lose me, he lost the version of himself that I made better. Without me, he was just ordinary. I whispered to the empty room. He finally saw the woman he'd created. Not the naive, hopeful girl he'd once loved, but the woman who'd learned that heartbreak can be the beginning of strength. I checked my phone once more. A new message from Lena. "You did it. You're free." I smiled. Yes, I was free, not because I'd hurt him, but because I'd stopped letting his actions define my worth. The music in my mind slowed, a soft piano, fading into quiet, that cinematic calm that comes when the storm has passed. And as I turned off the light, I whispered to myself one last truth. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying someone else, it's rebuilding yourself so beautifully that they'll never again be part of your story. RSOIUTO. In the morning after Ryan left for good, I woke up to a silence that no longer hurt. It wasn't heavy anymore. It felt light, almost sacred. The sunlight streamed through the blinds, dancing softly across the floor, and for the first time in months, I smiled without forcing it. The weight I'd been carrying, the lies, the doubt, the heartbreak, it wasn't there anymore. In its place, there was stillness. I made coffee in my tiny kitchen, listening to the sound of the spoon tapping the cup. It was simple, ordinary. But it was mine. I didn't check my phone. I didn't wonder where he was or who he was with, because none of that mattered now. For years, I had built my happiness around someone else's presence. Now, I was learning to build it around my own. In the weeks that followed, I started living again, not surviving, not pretending, living. I took long walks by the river, wore clothes that made me feel alive, and said yes to small joys I used to ignore. I joined an art class, something I'd always wanted to do but never did because Ryan thought painting was a waste of time. The first time I held a brush again, the colors felt like therapy. Every stroke, every blend of light and shadow, was a way of reclaiming the parts of me I'd abandoned. One evening, as I painted a sunset, I realized I wasn't painting the past anymore. I was painting the future, my future. Friends I hadn't seen in years started coming back into my life. Lena, of course, never left my side. She'd become the anchor I didn't know I needed. We'd sit on her balcony on Friday nights, sharing wine and laughter, talking about everything and sometimes, nothing at all. One night she looked at me and said, "You seem different, lighter." I smiled. "I guess peace looks good on me." We both laughed, but deep inside, I knew it was true. Something had shifted. I wasn't defined by pain anymore. I was defined by what I'd become after it. One afternoon I passed by the cafe where Ryan and I used to meet. For a moment, I thought about walking in to see if he still went there. to test if the sight of that place could still break me. But I didn't go in. I just stood across the street, looked at the window where we used to sit, and smiled, not with bitterness, but with gratitude. Because that chapter had taught me things no peaceful life ever could. I learned that love isn't proven by how much pain you can endure, it's shown by how gently you can let go. A few months later, I heard through a mutual friend that Ryan had left his job. Rumors said things had gone wrong between him and Mara. Apparently, the perfect relationship had fallen apart once reality set in. I didn't feel joy hearing it, not even satisfaction, just nothing, because by then, I had already outgrown the need to see him fall. His downfall wasn't my closure, my peace was. That realization made me smile again, a quiet, knowing smile that came from strength, not pride. Life moved forward in small, beautiful ways. I started freelancing, turning my art into something that not only healed me but paid the bills too. People began to notice my work, how every painting had both darkness and light, pain and beauty intertwined. And when someone asked what inspired me, I always said, everything that tried to break me. It felt poetic, how something born from heartbreak could evolve into purpose. One evening, I got an email from a gallery. They wanted to feature my work in a local exhibition. I remember sitting there, staring at the screen, realizing that life really does bloom from endings. The night of the exhibition, I wore a simple black dress, nothing loud, nothing flashy, just elegant enough to feel like myself. People walked around admiring the paintings, and in the middle of the gallery stood my favorite piece, a woman standing before a storm, her hair blowing in the wind, eyes closed, peaceful. The title read, Becoming Someone New. Lena came up beside me and whispered, "That's you, isn't it?" I smiled softly. It used to be. As the evening went on, I felt a quiet sense of pride, not for what I'd accomplished, but for how far I'd come. I thought about the girl I used to be, the one who waited for messages, who measured her worth by someone else's attention. And I silently thanked her, because without her hope, her heartbreak, her lessons, I wouldn't have become the woman I was now. When I got home that night, I stood by my window again, the same one where I'd once watched the city lights with tears in my eyes. But this time, I watched with peace in my heart. The same city, the same world, but everything looked different now, because I was different. I whispered to myself. I thought revenge would set me free, but it was forgiveness of myself that truly did. I wasn't forgiving him, I was forgiving myself for staying too long, for believing too much, for forgetting my own worth, and that forgiveness, that gentle release, was the final piece of my healing. As the night deepened, I picked up my sketchbook and drew one last image, a broken heart, stitched with golden thread. Imperfect, but beautiful, because that's what I had become, not flawless, but whole in a new way. The past wasn't my prison anymore, it was my teacher. And as I turned off the lights and lay down to sleep, I whispered into the quiet, I may have lost him, but I found myself. And for the first time in a very long time, that was enough. Moral impact, they say revenge changes you. They're right, but not in the way people think. It doesn't turn you into someone cruel. It turns you into someone aware of what you deserve, aware of what you'll never settle for again. Asterisk, when I began this journey, I thought revenge meant making him regret losing me, but now I understand, real revenge is no longer needing him to. Because peace, silence, and self-respect scream louder than any confrontation ever could. There's a strange beauty in walking away quietly, no shouting, no proving a point, just leaving the story behind. And writing a better one for yourself. People like Ryan, they live trapped in the same cycle of guilt and pride, but people like me, we rise, we learn, we rebuild. And maybe that's what true justice looks like, not seeing them fall, but seeing yourself fly. Every ending teaches something. Mine taught me this. You don't need to destroy the person who broke you. You just need to stop letting them exist inside you.